Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Courtside View webcast. This is sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune beat writer Steve Valentic. Steve, since last we webcasted, Missouri went 3-0. Maybe the most impressive one of those was a road win at Iowa State. A team that had been playing pretty well. Missouri wins that game despite really not getting a whole lot out of Marcus Denmon. It seemed like Iowa State was pretty committed to face guarding him and taking him out of the game. Is that okay for Missouri to play that way, or are there things you think they need to do to get him involved when he faces teams that are sort of bent on taking him out of the game?
Well, first of all, when you say not got a lot out of him, that 2 points in the first 19 and a half minutes, and he didn't take a shot in the second half from the field. His only points in the second half were 4 free throws late. I don't think that's the way Missouri wants to play. That's not really a winning formula on most nights. He's their best player. I think he's been their best player all year, and they need to get him involved. And he's got to work harder to get involved when teams are going to do that. I think you're going to see it happen a little bit more often. He needs to, work harder to get the ball. When he's got the ball, I think he probably needs to try to drive it a little bit more than he has. I think against Texas and Texas A&M, he showed that he was able to put the ball on the floor a little bit, and I thought did a pretty good job of making some plays, driving and dishing it to Ricardo Ratliffe. And I think when teams are going to play him the way that Chris Babb was at Iowa State, he's got to make those kind of adjustments. They were able to win, and it shows that they've got a lot of different weapons when they can win when their leading scorer only has 6 points. But they don't want their leading scorer to have 6 points very often.
Kind of a fine line between forcing it, too, though. Like, I know Illinois kind of played them the same way, and Missouri won that game, too. Probably, two of their most impressive wins of the year were those two games. If they can figure out a way to get him the ball, that seemed like the bigger issue, more so than getting, if he's open, he'll shoot it, but just to get the ball in his hands, that game was the biggest problem. So that's maybe more of a team effort, too, if you feel like it's important that he touched the ball more, than maybe run some more stuff for him. But by the same token, this is kind of a balanced team anyway, and if teams are going to commit to doing that and you can play 4-on-4 and win, I guess I don't see it as a huge crisis that he has 6 points in the game.
Definitely not. I don't think you want it to become a trend. And I think to Marcus's credit, he did have 7 assists in that game. Mm-hmm. So he was making some plays when he did have the ball, but he didn't get it very much in the second half. The one field goal he made, you want to talk about making a play, was a tip-in right before halftime, which ended up maybe hurting them a little bit because Scott Christopherson threw one in from Des Moines. But I think he is at least involved in the game. He's not completely absent when he's not getting shots or not getting the ball as much. He's still finding other ways to contribute, and I think that's to his credit.
We talked about this a lot last year, too, when he was shooting a great percentage and the other guys weren't, if he needed to be shooting more or being more selfish. And I guess I don't really feel like that's the way to go for him. He's a natural kind of a guy who takes what comes to him, and so I don't know that I would tamper with that too much. Missouri getting a lot out of Ricardo Ratliffe. Last year he did it in the non-con, and then he kind of faded a bit during the conference season. Haven't really seen that this year with Ricardo. Continues to shoot just a tremendous percentage and is doing all right even against, the bigger guys he's facing, which was kind of the question with him, whether he could continue to do it against the bigger, better competition. What do you think maybe is the difference between his game this year and last?
I think there's a lot of things. I think mentally, his approach, I think, has been a little bit different. You saw at Kansas State, he really got rattled with some early foul trouble and was a complete non-factor. That's the only time that's happened this year. And he came back at Iowa State and also got in early foul trouble. But he didn't go away this time. And I think that wasn't something that happened a lot last year. If he got early foul trouble, he a lot of nights became a non-factor. He was able to make arguably 2 of the biggest shots of that Iowa State game in the last minute and a half. Because he was still very much checked in and helping them. Phil Pressey found him a couple of times, and he was able to kind of hold off Iowa State's last push. I think, aside from just his approach, though, I think he's just more polished as a low post player, and I think it's made him a lot more effective. I have a feeling that Ernie Nestor, who works a lot with Missouri's big men and who worked a lot with Tim Duncan previously in his coaching career when he was an assistant at Wake Forest, has helped him a lot. I think Ricardo's done a better job of establishing position And then when he gets the ball, I think he's done a good job of kind of setting up. He likes to turn over his left shoulder and get to his right hand so he can shoot the ball. And I think he's done a better job of setting that move up than he had in the past. And then the last thing I'd say is Missouri, with the way that they're running offense, they don't forget about him the way that they sometimes did in the past. I think Phil Pressey is always looking to set him up whenever he's driving. And
a lot of times he's the guy screening for those guys, so he's the guy slipping to the basket.
And it's created a lot of easy opportunities for him. And, you look at the results, he's shooting nearly 78%, which is on pace to break the NCAA record, obliterate the Missouri record, but break the NCAA record. And it's because he's getting a lot of easy opportunities right next to the basket. He's converting them.
He's really become pretty much strictly a back-to-the-basket guy, too. Last year, once in a while, he'd just kind of drift out and shoot jumpers. I think he maybe shot one at the end of the shot clock against Texas A&M, but he's pretty much kind of eliminated that from the repertoire, so I wouldn't be surprised if I don't know there's any reason why he's not going to continue to make about 75% of his shots. He can make those shots, and that's the only shots he shoots, so I think he very likely could break that record. Okay, finally, Missouri, ranked 5th in the nation, going to Baylor, ranked 3rd in the nation. Probably the premier, well, maybe the
game lost just a little bit of luster after Monday night, but still.
That game at Kansas, I think people could have maybe predicted that Kansas was going to win that game. It's going to be a really tough game for Missouri because Baylor's good and it's at Baylor, but also because I think just from a matchup standpoint, this is maybe the toughest matchup for Missouri because they are so long and Missouri is so short. There's just such a disparity there. Just any ideas of how Missouri might be able to A, kind of defend so they're not giving up a bunch of easy baskets, and B, how do you attack a team that's just that long?
Well, first of all, as far as Baylor's length, I think they're the biggest team in the country. I mean, they're longer than Kentucky. They've got 6'9" guys buried deep on their bench that don't see the floor very often. And if they were in Columbia, I think Frank would probably find a way to give them a few minutes. But they've got so much depth and size, and a lot of those guys are really talented and athletic. It is a tough matchup. I think Missouri didn't handle that kind of team very well when they played at Kansas State. That's another team that has a lot of big bodies. Baylor's are probably more skilled, but they might not be as gritty. I think if people watched Baylor play at Kansas, they didn't necessarily look like the toughest team. I think they're
well, neither did Kansas State when they played at Kansas.
True, and I think that matters. But Scott Drew has said a lot this year that they should be a better rebounding team than they are. Now, they're still second in the Big 12 in rebounding margin, but they don't dominate the glass the way that you maybe would expect them to, especially given as well as they shoot it. And so I think that gives Missouri maybe a glimmer of hope. I don't really know how the Tigers try to combat them, though. I think maybe you're going to see Ricardo Ratliffe and Steve Moore playing together by necessity a little bit more. That's something we have seen a little bit more often in conference play, and I think we'll probably see it more than ever on Saturday.
I'm sure they'll play a lot of zone. They play a fair amount of zone anyway, but I think
that for sure. The one danger you run into against Baylor if you zone them too much is they've got two of the top three-point shooters in terms of accuracy in the conference with Pierre Jackson and Brady Heaslip. And offensively, Missouri's going to have to make some shots. That's something they didn't do in Manhattan. The game can get away from them quickly if they don't see some success early on the offensive end, because as Frank Haith has remarked a few times this year, when they struggle offensively, that tends to affect their defense a little bit. When they're able to get going in a groove offensively, all of a sudden they look a lot quicker on the defensive end as well. They're able to turn people over, and that's one thing that they can do against Baylor. Pierre Jackson has struggled handling the ball a little bit. Baylor, I think, is second in the Big 12 in turnovers, so that's something that Missouri is going to need to exploit to have a chance at success on Saturday.
All right, well, it'll be fun to see how it works. Join us again next week when we'll discuss that Baylor game.